And now, please give a warm welcome to the host of Broadway Buzz, Mr. Joe Gary.
Welcome to Broadway Buzz. I'm Joe Gary, and I'm thrilled to talk to you about Hell's Kitchen. In 2024, Hell's Kitchen didn't open on Broadway. It exploded on Broadway. This is a high-energy show that touches everyone. It's a magnificent work. It is a jukebox musical. As you remember, a jukebox musical is a collection of songs, very often from a single composer's work. In this case, we're focusing on the brilliant Alicia Keys. Alicia Keys is a singer, a brilliant performer. She's a composer, a lyricist. Her debut album happened in 2001, and she would present a song in that album called Falling that would move immediately to number one on the best seller list. Keep in mind, she presented this on Oprah, so that helped, of course. But her work is extraordinary. And over this quarter century, she has produced 9 albums. She has sold 66 million copies of her records, and she represents some of the most popular and exciting music that we have today. She was named by an organization as the ultimate #1 performer of the millennium in rhythm and blues. She deserves all of these credits. She's extraordinary. And Hell's Kitchen then is a jukebox musical. It is a collection of her music. But unlike the other jukebox musicals that we've seen, like the Michael Jackson musical, the Tina Turner musical, the Donna Summer musical, it is not a cavalcade of her life. It is sort of a moment frozen in time when she was 17 years old. So it has autobiographical influences. Facts are correct, but it is a free-form story about a young girl coming of age. It is a family story. It is a mother-daughter story. It is a story about a young girl who discovers the power of music and how it will transform her life. In terms of the physical production of this show, all of the artists involved are at absolutely the top of their form. The direction is extraordinary. Michael Greif, who directed Notebook. You had the privilege of seeing that work as the last show you saw. You're now seeing his work again. Michael has almost moved into Playhouse Square. He's been here so long. And in this case, he's created this very fluid view of New York. As you know, Hell's Kitchen is about an area in New York that's a very dangerous part of the city, and it always has been for over a century. But the atmosphere of the show explodes off the stage. The choreography is astonishing. I mean, it's like the earliest and best work of Agnes DeMille when she did Rodeo, and the energy of her dance burst off the stage. If you remember the first time you saw West Side Story, that kind of special street dancing that happens explodes in this show. And the dancing is a mixture of Martha Graham goes to Merce Cunningham, goes to Agnes DeMille, goes to Broadway. The young people who perform really are the metaphor of Hell's Kitchen, and they bring this show to life in an extraordinary way. I've never heard arrangements for a Broadway show that have been more exciting than these. The percussive sounds that you'll hear in the show just drive you literally out of your seat. For 3 days after, I found myself in the car driving, and I was going like this, and people were looking at me like I was having some kind of seizure. But I was still so caught up in the rhythmic ideas of the show. So this simple story of a young girl coming of age, it could be a cliche, but in the brilliant hands of the book writer Chris Diaz. He brings it to life with such sensitivity, and it reminds us, all of us, about how we've had to deal with family, how we've come to terms with who we are and growing up. So on one hand, this is a very personal work that Alicia Keys has written, but it becomes profoundly personal to us. All right, let us go back to the beginning and look at this arc of Alicia Keys' life. Since we don't really see it in the musical, I want to share some things about this extraordinary life that she's led. I want you to remember that she really is a Renaissance woman. Not only does she exceed as a singer and composer and brilliant classical pianist, but she falls into so many other various categories. She's had great success as an actress. Some of you will remember her in two really wonderful works, the Nanny Diaries and The Secret Life of Bees. Secret Life of Bees is one of my favorite movies. She would also become a producer for television, for movies, and for Broadway. She would direct works that would be seen in these great collages that she created in her contribution to producing things. She also then is a best-selling authoress. She has two works that appear on the New York Times bestseller list. The first one is a work that's called Tears for Water, and it's a collection of the lyrics from her first two albums and original poetry she wrote for the work. It's a very eye-opening book to look at. I mean, her lyrics blend so perfectly with her music. And those of you who have followed her music for all these years understand that they're singular statements. It's very hard to separate the words from the music, from the arrangement, from the presentation. All of it is seamless. But when you have the opportunity of just quietly reading the words, you realize that she writes in a kind of haiku fashion. Everything is very simple, very stripped down, and it's very beguiling because while in its simplicity, it looks obvious, but then when you start thinking about what it is, as you do when you read Tears for Water, you understand there's so much complexity there. I went through her 9 albums, and they really are hallmarks of who she is at that moment in her life. So not only is it a collection of wonderful songs that is pertinent for the times, but it is sort of a record of who this artist is and how she's grown, not only as an artist, but as a human being. But it is her second book that is the most provocative work of all. And that work is called More Myself, and she labels it a journey. I've read so many creative writers' musings on their life and on their art. But this one is very special because it doesn't only show you who she is as an artist, it shows you who she is as a human being. And obviously, I'm as interested in knowing her as a person and just spending an afternoon talking about the ideas of life with her as I am about seeing her when she electrifies the stage. For example, she writes about the pain she goes through in creating an album. It is very revelatory, and it makes you understand the thought that she puts in to everything that she does. So this woman really is a kind of cultural hybrid. Musically, culturally, and racially, there are so many sides to her. Musically, when you try to define her music, it is like the old-fashioned 60s and 70s sort of soul music, but then it is very contemporary in its use of hip-hop or rhythm and blues. There are elements of jazz, there are elements of gospel in her work. It's very eclectic work, and she clearly is a musical hybrid. One thing that's very important to understand is she was trained from a very young age as a classical musician, and so she has all of these great skills to bring to contemporary and pop music to give it a very unique sound. Culturally, she's very interesting. In her life, and the book reflects this more myself, she has maintained friendships from her childhood when she lived in Hell's Kitchen, but at the same time, she can freely call Michelle Obama and say, will you appear with me on the Grammy Awards when I host the awards? Or if she's feeling blue, she can call Oprah Winfrey and say, can I come and have tea for the afternoon? But at the same time, she's equally comfortable going back to her teachers, to her friends from the inner city, and the wide range of life she's had. So culturally, she is clearly a citizen of the world, but she is a child of Hell's Kitchen. I want to talk for a moment about the biography of her life. Her mother was born in Toledo, Ohio, so she has Ohio roots. Her mother wanted to be an actress and enrolled at New York University. She had some success off-Broadway as an actress, but early on in her career, she became pregnant and Alicia was born. There really wasn't a relationship to work out, so Alicia was raised as, a single parent child. Her mother was very concerned, of course, about being in New York, one of the most dangerous cities in the world, trying to raise a baby in this environment. So she would move into a place that was called Manhattan Plaza. And it was a condominium that existed in New York where people who belonged to the performance unions, the actors union, the dancers union, the stage managers union, the directors union, could all live in this building. It was a sort of subsidized arts building, and it was called Manhattan Plaza. It will become a central character in the musical you're going to see. And this was sort of the womb. This was the protection for this child, because what surrounded this apartment building was Hell's Kitchen. And so this is, one of the most dangerous areas in New York. And so the mother early on decided that she had to find a way of engaging her child in the apartment and in the protection of the apartment. A strange event would happen. Family friends would give them an old upright piano. They lived in a very small one-bedroom apartment, so in the small living room, they put the upright piano as sort of a room divider. And then her mother found the best piano teacher she could, and this, from a very, very young age, would transform Alicia. Alicia would spend 6 hours a day at the piano, learning the rigorous techniques of being a classical pianist. But at the same time, this teacher was smart enough to realize that this was a child of the city, and this was a child who was listening to pop music. This was a child who was listening to the music on the street. Pay very careful attention in the musical. We see these drummers on the street playing, like kettle drums, and it's fascinating to watch them perform, and this sort of pulsing sound that it gives. So the child then, from a very early age, had this very eclectic sense of music, this very hybrid sense of music. And then just finally, when we talk about the musical, cultural, and racial aspects of her life, her mother is white, her father is African American, her mother is Irish and Scottish and Italian, and her grandmother is Puerto Rican, so she is a true racial mix. So Alicia Keys is the sort of ultimate hybrid. So interesting that when the show opened in New York, the staid critic from the New York Times said, who hates all jukebox musicals, said this is probably the finest example of the jukebox musical because it doesn't try and cover a whole life. It doesn't try to be exceedingly epic in its storytelling. Rather, it tells a very personal, very real, very theatrical story about a young girl coming of age. Keep in mind, the musical would be nominated for 13 Tony Awards. It would win 2 for the best performances, the actor and supporting best actress and supporting actress. It would also then win the Grammy Award for the best show album of the year. So Alicia Keys now has 17 Grammy Awards. Okay, let's then see how this became a musical. We have to go back to 2011 when Alicia Keys, who experiments with everything. As I said, she's been a producer, she's been a writer, she's been an activist, she's very involved in children's causes around the world. She's been very involved in almost every aspect of the entertainment industry. So it's no surprise that in 2011, she decided to become one of the producers of a musical that was called Stick Fly. Nothing happened to the show. It closed after 70-some performances on Broadway. It received excellent reviews. I saw the work, and it's a very compelling work, and it's something that should really be considered for regional theaters. And I wish one of our local theaters would look into Stick Fly. It's a story about a Black community in Martha's Vineyard. As you know, Martha's Vineyard draws the elite every summer, the greatest politicians, the greatest actors, directors, everyone flocks to Martha's Vineyard, especially in the summer season. But there has always existed there this wonderful Black community. And so it was a very touching musical, but it failed. And this really, drew Alicia into the powers of Broadway and, that fine line of what makes a success. I mean, even though in this case the critics liked it, but it never found an audience. So in that same year, in 2011, she decided to create the musical Hell's Kitchen. She knew at the beginning that it was going to be a story from her life. It's a sort of very free interpretation of a period in her life where she had an epiphany. She's 17 years old. She's in great conflict with her mother. She's very drawn to the world of New York outside of her. She's very drawn to the community of Hell's Kitchen, life on the street. She's, experiencing her first sense of a love affair. And it becomes a very compelling, very simple story. Many of the facts in the story are based on Alicia's life, but it is very freely interpreted. So this is the vision she had of what she wanted to do. It would take her 12 years to achieve this. The first thing she did was to hire Chris Diaz to be the book writer. They would work together for over 5 years before anyone else entered into it, so they could flesh out this story of this young girl, this 17-year-old girl named Allie, and the relationship she would have with her mother and the relationship she would have with this extraordinary community. So let me for a moment look at 2 elements. They really become characters in the story, and we're talking about Hell's Kitchen, number 1. So by definition, the term Hell's Kitchen really started in about the 1880s when immigrants came to New York and they had to move to the poorest part of New York. So the Irish immigrants moved into an area they would label Hell's Kitchen. The Italians followed, the Germans followed, the Greeks followed. And what happened is people trying to maintain their nationality would fight with one another. So Hell's Kitchen was a very dangerous area. Number 1, the worst slums of the city were in Hell's Kitchen. Number 2, the police did everything to stay as far away from Hell's Kitchen as possible, and then these gangs sort of ruled the area. And this would be the sort of, hallmark of what Hell's Kitchen was, and it would exist It's an area that exists to this day. However, now it's highly gentrified. So we're looking at a period in the story that we see in Hell's Kitchen. The time is the 1990s. And in the story, you will find that the mother is constantly trying to protect Allie from the dangers of Hell's Kitchen. So that becomes a vital part of the show. I want you to pay very special attention to the idea that I've never seen choreography quite used this way, but the dancers in the show really represent the spirit, the energy, the sensuality, the sexuality, the danger of Hell's Kitchen. So watch those dance numbers. The first big dance number that you see in the opening of the show, Gospel, everything explodes on the stage in this extraordinary dance that's a mixture of theater dance, street dance, and modern dance. The choreographer of that is Camille Brown. And she is an extraordinary artist. I want you to pay very special attention to her because next season she's going to be directing and choreographing Dreamgirls. She will be the first Black director choreographer in 40 years to do a musical on Broadway. And I look forward to that with the greatest anticipation. You know, put it on your dance card and your dream list. It's going to be an extraordinary work. But you see her work brilliantly developed here. So in any case, we're back to the development process, and we have Alicia working with Chris Diaz in this 5-year period as they shape together the characters, what music is going to be used, and what the arc of the storyline is going to be used. In 2018, they added the great director Michael Greif. As I told you, you remember him from his brilliant work in Notebook. And you have this wonderful opportunity of seeing a director at the top of his game, giving you two very different kinds of theatrical presentation. The subdued, delicate nature of Notebook versus the explosive quality of Hell's Kitchen. Ironically, when Alicia was a very young girl, one of the first Broadway musicals she saw was Rent, and it transformed her life. This, of course, was directed by Michael. And, you know, what we saw even then, he loved to use scaffolding. He loved to etch very strong, indelible characters. And he would create an arc of a story that would be highly theatrical, that would move you through the story with great energy. He would go on and give us monumental works like Dear Evan Hansen. His work has, dominated Broadway for years. Keep in mind, in 1 year, he would open Notebook, he would open Hell's Kitchen at the same time. So a director of great prominence and skill. He would help shape this show in an extraordinary way. Again, one of his specialties, he loves to use scaffolding. He loves to use a sort of mixed media. Watch the use of projections. Watch the very theatrical use of lighting in the show. The incredible, very fluid use of staging. This is the hallmark of all of his work. Never is it better expressed than it is in this show. And watch how all of this builds in this show to the end of the show, the climactic moment when they sing one of her greatest hits, The Empire State of Mind. When you watch that at the end of the show, you want to immediately go to the airport and go to New York. I mean, it brings to life the energy of New York in the most extraordinary way. So Michael Greif is at the height of his success in this work. Also, watch very carefully the way characters are developed in this story. The role of Allie, the young girl. There is a brilliant teacher who teaches her music. And it is, of course, the key that not only opens her life as an artist, but it opens her life as a human being. And this teacher literally transforms her life. And again, the performance by the actress and the songs that are used for the teacher to demonstrate who she is and her love of music is so compelling, and it pulls you very profoundly into the story. So Michael, again, brings to this work this wonderful sense of characterization, this wonderful ability of knowing how to manipulate a huge musical, how to move you through a storyline in a very visual way. The show never stops. It's visually dazzling. And never have I seen the use of scaffolding used in a more sexual way. It's an extraordinary work, and it plays out beautifully in the show. Okay, so the show is put together, the team is put together, and finally in 2023, they moved the show to the Public Theater. Let me for a moment talk about the Public Theater. If you go to New York and you see one off-Broadway space, please make it the Public Theater. It's on Lafayette Street in the Village, a very interesting part of the city. There are now 5 theaters that make up the Public Theater. You remember that it was created by Joseph Papp, who was the ultimate guru of off-Broadway in the 1950s. He would create not only the Public Theater, but he would create Shakespeare in the Park, which exists to this day, where free theater is performed in Central Park. So Joseph Papp really led the way to giving us a form of experimental theater. And his first great work then was Hair. But then remember, he would go on to discover Chorus Line, he would discover Hamilton, and then, of course, Hell's Kitchen would find its home there also. It immediately sold out at the Public Theater. The word of mouth was very strong about the show, and they continued working on the show in great detail. The show would ultimately move to Broadway a year later, and they would make changes to the ending of the show. They would cut a song, they would finesse the show, and ultimately then it would just explode on Broadway. I just want you to, again, to be aware of the synthesis of all of the artists coming together. I mean, this is a truly collective work. There's something about Alicia Keys. Everything she touches turns to gold. She is a perfectionist from the earliest age, as this little child who sat obsessed at a piano, working 6 hours a day, perfecting her technique, perfecting her understanding of musical theory. This child that had this love of the arts, that embraced it in such a powerful way, will do the same thing with this musical. And when you look at this musical, you really have to believe that she influences every aspect of the show. For example, we have a young girl playing the lead, playing Allie. When you read her credits, she graduated from high school and now she's the star of a Broadway show. The actress who played it in New York would win a Tony Award and really set herself up as one of the great artists of the decade. So Alicia would spend endless hours trying to find the right talent. I mean, keep in mind, this young girl who plays Allie has to be a brilliant singer with tremendous vocal range, has to be a dancer, has to be an actress. We have to believe in her. I mean, this role is about this simple young girl coming of age. And so the idea of the danger of taking a young artist who has to stand up with all the other artists in the show, have had years of experience on the stage. She has to play scenes with the actress who plays the piano teacher. an actress of great sensitivity and great range who's had a long life in the theater. But this young girl has to stand up in the same way. And Alicia Keys never gives up. She always finds the right artist. She always places the right thing in the right way. What we're given with this show, in my mind, is some of the most extraordinary dance that we've seen in the theater. It's one of the best integrations of music and lyrics into a jukebox musical. She takes her great songs that had great hits all over the world, and she transforms them so they're right for the father to sing, or right for the girlfriends to sing, or right for Allie to sing, or right for the piano teacher to sing. And if you really know Alicia Keys' music and those wonderful arrangements she creates, suddenly you have to rehear the music in a totally new way. So I want you to sensitize your ear to the phenomenal arrangements that you'd hear. Several of the musicians are upstage and you see them behind a scrim. The rest of them are sort of offstage in a box, and you will see them in the curtain call when they are presented. But I do want you to be aware of them, and they do deserve tremendous applause because the arrangements in this show are extraordinary. So you're in for a very great treat. Hell's Kitchen is an extraordinary happening in the theater. It is the story of a coming of age. It is a story about a love affair between a mother and a daughter. It is a story about a young girl connecting to her community. And God knows we need to connect to our community today. It is a work that speaks to being human, that speaks to being an artist, that speaks to trying to find a fullness in life. Hell's Kitchen is an extraordinary work. Enjoy.